Guests, please welcome to the stage APAICS Congressional Fellow, Alicia Chen.
Hello, everyone, and happy AA and NHPI Heritage Month. I want to introduce your moderator for today's conversation, writer, actor, and comedian, Jimmy O. Yang.
Thank you.
I also want to introduce myself. My name is Alicia Chen, and I'm the APAICS Congressional Fellow in the Executive Office of the Vice President. I'm a first-generation Chinese American born and raised in a small rural Pennsylvania town. I'm also the daughter of immigrants who came to the United States for a better life. My dad was the first in his family to become educated past middle school. After college, he took an opportunity to study in the United States. I'm the third of 3 children, born because of that search for a better life. My mom was a successful professional in China. Here, with broken English and no American education, she waited tables to support our family. It's fair to say that much of their lives was spent feeling disconnected, not fully Chinese and not fully American at the same time. We've all felt imposter syndrome at some point, what it feels like to doubt your abilities and whether you belong. I want to acknowledge that I feel a small bit of that on this very stage, because I could have never imagined myself with you all today. I was raised by parents more concerned with how to survive in a new country rather than how to serve. However, because of APAICS, I've had the privilege of working for the first AA and NHPI woman Vice President, Kamala Harris. If anyone has helped me overcome imposter syndrome, it's Kamala Harris. Even before becoming the first AA and NHPI Vice President, she has always spoken about how to never let the perception of how others see you define who you're meant to be. And as a woman of many, many firsts, she reminds us of what our leaders, especially AA and NHPI leaders, can be, and that we have always belonged. Today's APAICS Legislative Leadership Summit is a moment to celebrate many firsts. In many ways, we all are a set of firsts. There are pioneers in this room, such as Congresswoman Judy Chu, the first Chinese American woman elected to Congress. There's Mayor Aftab Purabel, the first Asian American elected as mayor of Cincinnati. I'm also honored to be an APAICS Fellow with other young AA and NHPI leaders. We're the multi-ethnic children of educators, musicians, pharmacists, small business owners in cities and towns across and beyond the United States. Our diaspora is vast, but what joins us is our desire to pursue careers in service. As Vice President Harris has said, while I might be the first person in this office, I will not be the last. Looking at the leaders in this auditorium, we are descended from parents full of courageous firsts. We are a multitude of firsts. The first to graduate from college, the first to be born in the United States, the first to pursue careers in service. We're building a legacy and forging a strong community of generations of AA and NHPI leaders in public service. You may be the first, but you're certainly not the last. And now, it is my honor to introduce the first AA and NHPI woman to be elected Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Thank you, Alicia. And Madam Vice President, welcome to the APAICS Leadership Summit.
And happy 30th anniversary, everyone.
Woo!
Jimmy, before we get started, I just have to talk about Alicia.
Yeah, she's amazing.
And she is just so, such an incredible representation of our young leaders. Alicia, I'm so proud of you. She has been, I know there are many members of Congress here, she has been going up to the Hill to talk about how we can coordinate all of the work we're doing on mental health. When I look at our Gen Z leaders, they have so many talents and they're so courageous, and she is an incredible organizer among the young people in my office, but around the issues that we really need to focus on if we care about the future of our country. Can we please applaud Alicia for her work? Please. Really. She's wonderful. Okay, hi, Jimmy.
Hello, how are you? Good
Very
seeing
well.
you. I have no idea why you guys called me to do this. Lisa Ling must have been not available. Went down the list, Connie Chung not available, now here I am, But it's an absolute honor to be here with you. And all these amazing leaders. I've been listening to a lot of talks, First Mayor of Cincinnati and like everyone. It's a lot of firsts, a lot of groundbreaking trailblazers of our community. And of course, you are the first AA NHPI Vice President of the United States. So I want to ask you, what does it mean to you to be the first, and how has your heritage, informed your views and your roles as a leader?
So, as Alicia said, my mother gave my sister and me a lot of advice, and one of the things that she said to me that has had a lasting impact is she said, Kamala, you may be the first to do many things, make sure you're not the last. My mother was 19 years old when she arrived in the United States by herself. She was the eldest of my grandparents' 4 kids. And she said, and she was part of one of the first waves of Indians to come in relative modern history to the United States in the 50s, right? So anybody of South Asian background, you'll know that this was early. There were not many Indian Americans or Indians who had come in at that point. And my mother said to her father when she was 19 years old, I want to cure cancer. And so what I learned later is she secretly applied to UC Berkeley. And she got accepted.
Wow.
And so she went to my grandfather and said, I want to go. And my grandfather was very progressive. His eldest child, we know in Asian culture what birth order means, right? I am the first grandchild too, I'll say. And my grandfather said, go. And so she arrived in the United States by herself because she had a passion and she had a goal. And her life was committed to 2 things, raising her 2 daughters and ending breast cancer. And my grandfather was probably one of the favorite people in my life, especially during my childhood. We were pen pals. So any of you of my generation, you may remember those blue envelopes with all the stripes on them, right? That you'd send back and forth. And you open them, you'd have to open it with a letter opener and unfold it. And my grandfather and I were pen pals, and we would go back to India every 2 years growing up. So basically trying to avoid monsoon season. So it was sometime between October and December, around the Christmas holidays usually. And I, as the eldest grandchild, had the honor, among anyone in our family, of being invited by my grandfather to take his morning walk with his retired buddies. Wow. And they would every morning gather, these old men who were very smart and very knowledgeable, and they would take their walk. And I would hold my grandfather's hand, and I was the one who was able to go on the walk with him. And my grandfather and his friends would passionately debate the importance of democracy and a government that treated people equally and with fairness and a government that was not corrupt. And that influenced my life in more ways than I can ever explain. even though I didn't realize it at the time. And all of that had an impact then on what I decided to do with my life. My mother, when she arrived in the United States, she automatically, given who my grandfather was and about the fight for independence in India, my mother then, of course, you might know this in retrospect, took to the streets to march for civil rights in her sari. Yeah, and that's how she met my father. And all of that has had a profound influence. But I will also add to this about being the first, because there's so many firsts here. And there are so many who are the first have decided we will mentor you and we will support you and we will remind you of what it involves, and also that you have an incredible community of people that are encouraging you every step of the way. So here's the thing about breaking barriers. Breaking barriers does not mean you start on one side of the barrier and you end up on the other side. There's breaking involved. And when you break things, you get cut. And you may bleed. And it is worth it every time. Every time. And so too, especially the young people here, I say to you, when you walk in those rooms, being the only one that looks like you, the only one with your background, you walk in those rooms, chin up, shoulders back. Be it a meeting room, a boardroom, a courtroom, a hearing room. You walk in those rooms knowing that we are all in that room with you, applauding you on, and expecting certain things from you, including that you will not be silent in those rooms. And that we expect that from you because we also expect that you will internalize and know we're there with you. And so your voice can be strong. It is, as Alicia said, my mother would say to me, don't you ever let anybody tell you who you are. You tell them who you are. Don't ever carry as a personal burden your capacity to do whatever you dream and aspire to do based on other people's limited ability to see who can do what. This is part of what's involved, is that we have to know that sometimes people will open the door for you and leave it open, sometimes they won't. And then you need to kick that door down. Excuse my language.
We're going to make T-shirts with that saying, kick the door down. I literally just got emotional listening to that. Like, I think all of us in this room have that experience, you know, like me as an actor, you know, whether you're in political office or any job you walk into, oftentimes we are the only Asian person there, and how to navigate that. And for me, it's always, hey, I understand, you know, I'm fortunate to be here. Thank you for opening the door. But it's never like I try to not blame it or anything. Like if I miss an audition or whatever, I just got to be a better actor. Forget about Asian, not Asian. I just got to be better than everyone else. Yeah. Like you said, so I won't be the last.
That's right.
You know?
And it is, you know, I think it is very much part of Asian culture. I think many cultures, but that we are taught duty.
Yes.
And duty is something, it's not about whether you have the luxury or the will. It's your responsibility, it's your duty. And you don't question it, it just is. Mm-hmm. And part of that is the duty that we feel when we are the first in particular, to understand what that means to people who are not us, meaning everyone else. You know, we learn a lot culturally about the fact that it's not about us, right? Yeah. It's about family, it's about community, it's about country, it's about values. You know, someone once described it to me as if you think of it, the culture, and I'm oversimplifying obviously, but as an onion. The individual is at the core of the onion, and then there is the family. and there is the community, and there is, and there is. And all of those things are bigger. And that's part of how we are conditioned to think in many ways, which sometimes leads to probably a willingness to minimize the importance of the individual, and we have to be careful about that. But duty is an important part of it, to your point.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier, just being raised by immigrants, I think gives us that perspective and the gratefulness to be here in a great democracy, because that can't be taken for granted, especially in a lot of other places in the world.
That's right.
And which leads me to my second question. I actually prepped cards.
But here's the thing I want to add while you're pulling out whatever's coming out of your pocket.
Questions.
It also should. My experience. I'll talk about my lived experience. That also taught me that you have to fight for rights for everybody, and you have to be in the fight. You can't sit it out, right? And that's part of that's certainly how I was raised. You can't sit it out, and because you know how inequity happens, you know what happens when systems create displaced power, or when systems are suppressing the rights of other people, you know, and so that's part of how I was raised as well.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that in very recent history, you know, like since the Dobbs decision.
Yeah.
A lot of our rights are under attack, like what we took for granted as basic rights, you know. And you have led the charge on protecting the reproductive freedom for this administration, and we thank you for that. So what are you hearing from Americans as you talk about protecting reproductive freedom, and how has it been the fight on restoring Roe v. Wade?
Yeah. So again, I look at it in terms of the fact that, one of the, I never met him, but one of the mentors for me in terms of the career that I chose was Thurgood Marshall, who understood the importance of translating the passion from the streets to the courtrooms of America, to make real the promise of America. And when I think about the Dobbs decision, which was just about 2 years ago, the highest court in our land, the court of Thurgood and RBG, just took a constitutional right that had been recognized from the people of America, from the women of America. And thereafter, in state after state, laws are being proposed and passed that will criminalize healthcare providers, punish women, some make no exception even for rape or incest. And so there is, about this issue, the fact that over the last 2 years, this issue and the way it has played out has resulted in real and profound harm to real people on a daily basis. You've all heard the stories of a woman who goes to the emergency room as she's experiencing a miscarriage and denied care because the physicians there are afraid they'll be jailed. Goes back, still denied. It wasn't until she developed sepsis that she's treated. And they're horrendous stories, and these are only the stories we know about. So many people silently suffering. There's the harm component of this that is profound and real. There is also the fact that in now 2024, a decision has been made that takes from the American people a fundamental freedom to make decisions about one's own body. Think about what that's taken us back to. That one does not have the right to exercise authority over issues that I call heart and home. Issues that are fundamental to what should be a right to decide to start a family or not. And where does this go? Because for the lawyers in the room and those that just are interested in reading Supreme Court decisions, Clarence Thomas said the quiet part out loud. Other rights may be very much at stake. And when there is when you start to see an erosion of rights, where does it end if the people don't stand up? Right? And, demographically, among the various groups, the last numbers I saw, 80% of the AA and HPI community is in favor of freedom and choice. And again, because it's a simple point, which I often make, for many people, one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do. She will make that decision based on her ability to actually exercise good judgment. And can you imagine these legislators that are supposing their judgment is better than the ability of that individual woman to know what's in her own best interest? It's profound when you think about the layers of what is involved here.
And another, very important issue is guns in our country. And President Biden tapped you to oversee the first ever White House of gun violence prevention.
Yeah.
So what is the administration doing to address gun violence in the communities?
So let's start with the very tragic fact that gun violence is the leading cause of death for children in America. Not car accidents, not cancer, gun violence. #1 cause of death for children in America right now. 1 in 5 Americans has a family member that was killed by gun violence. As I travel the country, I talk with mothers and fathers who say a silent, maybe not so silent prayer when they drop their kid off at school or as they walk to the school bus, that they'll come home safe. I started a college tour last fall. Again, I just have to say I love Gen Z. I really do. I know it's complicated if you have a Gen Z member in your family, but they're so spectacular. Gen Z, think about, first of all, the fact that this might be humbling for some. Somebody who's 18 today was born in 2006.
That's when I graduated.
I knew it was going to be humbling. And for Gen Z, for the most part, they've only known the climate crisis. They have coined a term, climate anxiety, to describe their fear of having children or aspiring to buy a home for fear it'll be wiped out by extreme weather. They witnessed the killing of George Floyd. They lost fundamental phases of their education during the pandemic and socialization. They, in the height of their reproductive years, saw the court take this right. And I would ask this question when I did my college tour every time, and over 15,000 kids showed up, by the way. I mean, in packed auditoriums and often overflow rooms, which also tells you they were standing in line for hours in some cases, not for a rock concert, but to literally witness something like this, right? And I'd ask every time, raise your hand, I'd ask the students, if at any point between kindergarten and 12th grade, you had to endure an active shooter drill. Almost every hand went up. And I'd often say, because there's press all the time, I'd say, press, please take a look at this. I'd ask the students, keep your hands up. I'd ask the older adults, it's bone chilling. So all of that to say that when I believe that, first of all, there's been a false choice that has been perpetuated, including in this town, that suggests you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away. I'm in favor of the Second Amendment. And I believe we need an assault weapons ban. We need universal background checks. We need red flag laws, right? And given how our young leaders have experienced this, I mean, growing up in California, the closest thing I had to an active shooter drill was an earthquake drill or a fire drill, right? And by the way, fire drills happen like consistently, and thankfully we rarely see any fire in a school. Gun violence, very different issue. When our young leaders start voting in their numbers on so many of these issues, I believe we are going to see a sea change in terms of how we address it, because our young leaders in particular are very practical and they want to see things done. And what I love about them is they're not going to wait for us to figure it out. They're going to do it. Mm-hmm. They're going to do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice President. That was great. I mean, these are two very, very tough issues, subjects, and I think hopefully we can, see more hope and inspiration coming from not just us, not just you, but the younger generation.
And
well.
On the subject, I mean, we know that it visits itself on the Asian community across the country. I mean, whether it be Atlanta, the president and I went down after those horrific killings of young women there. Monterey Park, Judy Chu is here. And she's been an extraordinary leader for her constituents. I've visited Monterey Park and the families. Not to mention, not only has it visited itself upon Asian communities, but when you couple that with the anti-Asian hate that has been spewed, especially in recent years, the fear is everywhere, and including, of course, in the Asian community.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have great leaders that have done great things for our community. So with my last question, I want to kind of look into the future a little bit. Like, you've done a lot with the leaders here to, protect our freedom, to create opportunity, to strengthen our democracy, like we've talked about. How are you thinking about the work ahead, and what can we do as a community to strengthen our future together?
So the first thing is to know our power. And I think it's critically important to not ever let anybody silence your voice. And to know that it is not about asking permission to speak.
Yes.
That's not going to get it. One needn't and shouldn't wait for permission to speak. There are so many issues that are facing us as a country. Not to mention this, I mean, I have now, as vice president, met over 150 world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, and kings, many multiple times. The last 3 international trips I took, so at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, were Dubai I presented for the United States at COP28, the Global Climate Conference. I went to the UK. Rishi Sunak invited me to come and speak about my theories on the safety that we need in AI. And then this year at the Munich Security Conference, where I spoke about America's position as it relates to many global issues and security issues. Almost to a one, I've now met many of these leaders multiple times. We're on a first-name basis. They came up to me, Kamala, I hope you guys are going to do all right in this election. Understand that the power that we have right now that we must own and exercise will have an impact on people in our own country and people around the world. People who are fighting against autocracy and corruption around the world will be impacted, not can be, I believe will be. You know, we as the United States, we walk into these rooms around the globe with the self-appointed and earned authority to talk about the importance of democracy, rule of law. But I say to a room full of role models, when you're a role model, people watch what you do to see if it matches what you say. I imagine some young women fighting for the right to be educated. And an autocrat saying, you want to talk about the rights of women? Look at what the United States is doing. So right now in particular, I say that, Jimmy, this issue is about what's going to happen in the next 170-something days. And everyone's got to be heard and demand that you be heard. And remind our families and our friends and our community of their right and responsibility and duty, dare I say, to answer a fundamental question at this point. What kind of country do we want to live in? As much as anything, that's what's before us. And I will end my point, again, with great optimism, based on everything I described about who our young leaders are, but also what I know this group of leaders to be. We, our parents, our children, our grandparents, we here believe in the promise of America. We believe in the promise of America. And this then becomes a moment where that belief has to spur us into action, knowing that we can determine its future. And that is our power. That is our power.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. One more time.
Thank you.
That was truly amazing.